In 1985, Li Sheng expressed to China that, hoping for a peaceful end to the war, Zhou Gong put forward 3 conditions for this. Vietnam as a world leader, one of the few socialist countries. At the beginning of this establishment, the relationship with China was very close. During the Vietnam War, Vietnam has received support from China on many occasions. But when Li Shi came to power, not only did the conflict spread to neighboring countries, even provoked disputes at the Chinese border. China can't stand it. Launched a self-defense counterattack against Vietnam. At the end of the war, Li Shi wants to end the fighting and seek peace with China. The conditions set by the Division of Labor are very specific. 30 years from 1946 to 1975, Vietnam fought tirelessly against the United States. The first year of establishment in Vietnam, and during the tenure of Vietnamese leader Ho Chi Minh, the friendly relations between Vietnam and China have been stable, solid as a rock. Ho Chi Minh, the leader of the Communist Revolution in Vietnam, after the First World War, come to Paris full of dreams. At the Paris Peace Conference, although he proposed granting Vietnam full autonomy, was ignored. But the visit was not in vain, because there he met Zhou Enlai of Liu Fa. After the October Revolution, Ho Chi Minh officially became a communist, and followed Zhou Enlai to the Chinese Whampoa Army. School development collaboration. During their time together, they cultivated a deep revolutionary camaraderie. During my studies in China, Ho Chi Minh served as a Soviet advisor to Sun Yat-sen, Rodin's secretary and translator. It is because Ho Chi Minh focused on the cause of communism, so he's either wanted for something, or evading arrest. On the way, he had to quickly switch identities and names. To save his life, he is even in Hong Kong, China, for a considerable amount of time. When World War II ended, when Japan attempted to raid Vietnam, Ben defends home. Ho Chi Minh seeks to return to his motherland. In 1941, Ho Chi Minh, the leader of the Vietnamese resistance, rising up from the Sino-Vietnamese border, after successfully returning to China, he founded a company dedicated to national liberation and a unified Vietnam, Independence League. Li Tu works together to pursue freedom in Vietnam. So go back to your homeland. But he and Chinese communists maintain close contacts, frequent and secret trips to Guangxi, communicating with members of our party. Unfortunately, in 1942, when Ho Chi Minh was conducting clandestine activities in China, arrested by the Kuomintang authorities, imprisoned. However, in the reign, he did not become depressed. Instead, used poetry to pass the time. The years in prison. It was later edited to a prison diary. After 13 months, with the help of the Communist Party of China, Ho Chi Minh was able to regain freedom in memory of the revolutionary comrade who was rescued. Ho Chi Minh decided, use that comrade's name as your own. That's what everybody knows. The origin of Ho Chi Minh's fame, by 1945, as the Japanese army retreated one after another in the Pacific battlefield. Criminal is gone. The Provisional Government of Vietnam in Ho Chi Minh. Homeopathy led the August Revolution. The Declaration of Independence has been published. The Democratic Republic of Vietnam was proclaimed. But the joy didn't last. The French invaders returned shortly after. Facing new aggression, Ho Chi Minh quickly established a coalition government, the anti-Japanese coalition government of Vietnam, and served as chairperson, start negotiations with France. Despite Phaki's apparent willingness to negotiate, it's hard, but it has been brewing another invasion of Vietnam. Sure enough, shortly after the negotiations, the relationship between France and Vietnam has completely broken down. A full-scale attack on Vietnam, facing the might of France, Ho Chi Minh's Vietnam lost to thieves. Many important cities quickly fell. He had to decide, shift the focus of the war to the countryside, led the soldiers into guerrilla warfare. At the same time, Ho Chi Minh is still courting the Soviet Union and even the Chinese Communist Party. Seek assistance. Stalin's attention was entirely focused on Europe. Ignore Vietnam. Communist Party of China, also skating on thin ice in the War of Liberation. Unable to pull Vietnam. This made Ho Chi Minh's anti-Japanese fighters. Seems very difficult. Fortunately, the turnaround is just around the corner. After the establishment of the new country in 1949, our country immediately went all out to assist Vietnam. Even high-ranking officers like Chen Jiang went to the front, fighting alongside Ho Chi Minh, although the newly established Xinguo is in its infancy. But it has brought together a brave and capable army. It was a bolt from the blue for the French army. Soon after, with the support of our country, the French army had no choice but to withdraw. Withdrawal from Vietnam, the profound friendship between Ho Chi Minh and us. This is further consolidated. But just when Ho Chi Minh thought, when you can build a country with peace of mind, the United States has set foot on the promised land again. How did Ho Chi Minh respond to the US military? How does our country support Vietnam? Li Sheng took the initiative to contact for peace talks. Details of wartime. Deng Xiaoping put forward 3 conditions for this. Since 17 Ho Chi Minh, Vietnam has established friendly relations with our country. How did Lee damage gradually destroy after that? What about the original Sino-Vietnamese relationship? The covetousness of the American empire is obvious. To resist the ideology promoted by Su, they are eager to gain new territory. Immediately began to exert influence on Vietnam. Finally decided to replicate a puppet regime locally. There was a huge kitchen fight. When Vietnam's desire for reunification seemed within reach, when confused by the involvement of the United States, the Democratic Republic of Vietnam has decided to unify the country. The Vietnam Civil War began. The United States is not only officially involved in this dispute. More reports of a large number of advanced weapons. To support South Vietnam, the fighting spirit of North Vietnam remains strong. Under the leadership of Ho Chi Minh, set off the climax of the national anti-Japanese war. To support this brotherly country, both our country and the Soviet Union went to North Vietnam, provided a wealth of military assistance, whether it is weapons, equipment, or power support, as long as North Vietnam needs. Our country will help, in addition to a deep friendship. Our country knows how to help the Democratic Republic of Vietnam, officially assisting the great cause of international communism. We're helping ourselves with the support of our country and the Soviet Union. North Vietnamese morale triumphs? Led America originally. Hoping for a quick solution, the warriors' plan turned into a cloud. I was also caught in the quagmire of a protracted war. In 1969, with Nixon's inauguration as President of the United States, desire to end this, a battle that lasted a full decade. They began to withdraw their troops from Vietnam, but as Vietnam's victory dawned, tragedy happens by accident. Ho Chi Minh dies of heart attack, died at the age of 79. After the death of Ho Chi Minh, Lee Shi took over the banner of the regime, launched a new generation, political events in the pavilion with Ho Chi Minh. In 1973, the United States and Vietnam reached an agreement. Soon after, American troops began to withdraw from Vietnam, although Vietnam's most intractable obstacle has been removed. But the Sino-Vietnamese relationship has undergone subtle changes. At this time, Vietnam still needs China's assistance, but not as urgent as during the war. With the intervention of the Soviet Union, Vietnam has largely turned its back on China, switched to the Soviet Union, although both countries belong to the socialist camp. However, this shift, negotiated aid with China and Vietnam before, decided to dock Xiang Jingting. China had to start questioning the Soviet Union's intentions. In the discussion of Vietnam, we have repeatedly reminded Lee Shi Group to pay attention to the Soviet Union, because of the revisionist Soviet Union may not be an American retainer. The revolution that harmed Vietnam. Don't even treat China with heart. Vietnamese side, but turn a blind eye to this friendly advice, even as Vietnam's relations with the Soviet Union grew closer. To the detriment of the group, it complained about China's aid. Not enough help. For example, June 1973. Premier Q met with Li Duan in Beijing and other personnel. Li Duan actually publicly stated during the talks that, discontent with China's lack of assistance to Vietnam, he proposed to annual output of 3 million tons. Expectations for refinery systems. Such a plant system can produce gasoline, plastic core, fiber. Vietnam is looking forward to. China can provide support in this regard. When Premier Zhou learned of this, he patiently explained China's industrial level. There was simply no way to provide such a system at the time. And even if it can provide, it can also cause a lot of waste pollution. So it's not that China doesn't want to help Vietnam. I couldn't do it. But after listening to Premier Zhou's explanation, Li Shi proposed Japan could offer a similar system. Vietnam is willing to prioritize doing business with China. These words are obviously threatening. With previous Vietnamese leaders, the attitude towards China is completely opposite. And then 1975, North Vietnam launched a fierce general offensive against South Vietnam. But 2 months later, the victorious unification of Vietnam. At that time, Li Shi became increasingly cold towards China. Conversation with Deng Xiaoping gradually escalated tensions. At that time, Sino-Soviet relations were already terrible. Li Shang did not want to explicitly stand against China, Soviet side, and counting on China to continue providing assistance. Vietnam after reunification? Huge contradiction in international politics. On one side is China, the big country to the north. On one side is the Soviet Union, which has many historical problems. As expected, Vietnam favors the distant Soviet Union. In addition, the Soviet Union helped to make it even stronger. Vietnam's China policy has undergone a sea change. So what happens next? Where will Sino-Vietnamese relations go? What unexpected move will the Eisen Group make? Does it damage the relationship between the two countries? Now, 1985. Vietnam Jiangting Station Otsum seeks help from China, and was put forward with Deng Gong's 3 conditions. Vietnam was closely tied to the Soviet Union at the same time, continuously expanding the border. Will it pose a threat to China? Throughout the anti-American war in Vietnam, Yu Fang has been preaching to build a peaceful and unified country. But only after the conflict is over, Li Duan Group still violates the will of the people. The chaos continues, even provoke war against the Republic of China. In the early days of the founding of Vietnam, slow economic development, Lý Duan had the ambition to annex the surrounding small countries. Then Vietnam walked at the pace of visiting China. Brewing hegemony in Southeast Asia, taxi behavior in Vietnam is unmistakable. As a result, the sub-southern region is increasingly entangled in the light of swords and shadows. Maybe it drove out the Americans before, gave him exceptional confidence to lose, began to set their greedy sights on China. This is undoubtedly a huge betrayal of China. August 1978. 200 Vietnamese troops were unable to cross the border, occupy the land of Prenlin in our country. They actually built a stronghold overnight, and drove away the sons and daughters of China. In November, the Vietnamese army not only invaded Guangxi again. It refers to submachine gun raids on innocent people, causing heavy casualties. They also knocked down boundary pillars. It has been raging in Vietnam for a long time. Overseas Chinese who belong to China has committed shameful and vile acts, although we convey peace and friendship. Call on it to contain expansion, but it's still a mention. Not only does it violate the treaty, also openly occupied many islands in the Nanshan Islands. China sees that the world has no tolerance. Finally, in February 1979, our 560,000 service life of the PLA, the self-defense counterattack against the moon kicked off. Although the Vietnamese Army Eagles have been preparing for war for a long time, but not the same liberation, the military front quickly advanced to the outskirts of Hanoi. Vietnamese government dog-teetering. With victory looming, we chose to withdraw in danger. Why is this so? Because of our original intention, just to wake up Vietnam. I don't really want to fight. The goal has been achieved, and the troops will be withdrawn immediately. The war greatly shocked Vietnam. It is also Lý Duan who no longer dares to have non-judgmental thoughts. Until 1985, China and Vietnam are gradually reconciling. Due to the disaster in the Soviet Union, he pleaded for help. He pleaded in vain. Lý Duan began to hope that China and the Soviet Union would return to the past with warmth, even through the Indian government, hinting to our country that there's no intimacy. However, Deng Gong has seen through. Li Lingji the Young proposed 3 non-negotiable conditions. First, the Vietnamese side wants to take back the expelled overseas Chinese, and don't treat them badly again. Second, the Sino-Vietnamese border must cease fire. The long-term friction between the two sides cannot be endless. Third, demands that Vietnam withdraw its troops from Cambodia. No more interference in Lao's internal affairs. Facing Deng Gong's famous words, Li Shang did not give consent. The two sides exchanged fire on the border. It's been going on in Chiu Zai. It was not until 1989 that the Vietnamese army withdrew from Cambodia. Diplomacy between the two sides is on the right track. Although both China and Vietnam prioritize peace, if not provoked, we will try our best to solve the problem peacefully, fight side by side. And its heart has helped Vietnam for many years. Betrayal. It's an evil risk, Sai.